South Carolina and Shane Beamer put their foot down and demand that they get paid the buyout from the contract that was already signed from Desmond Umeozulu before he hit the transfer portal and went to Alabama. Plus, a big South Carolina women's basketball loss and baseball scrimmages that are starting before the season begins in just a couple weeks. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. I hope everyone's having a fantastic Thursday night as I record this. Could be better because South Carolina just lost. I know it's about 10 o'clock on the East Coast. Wanted to wait until after the game to get a post-game reaction in. See if we can fix this light a little bit better. So, whatever. But I want to say thank you so much to everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listening to every day. Shout out to everydayers. Also, again, I'm your host, Chris Marler of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in America. And we have you to thank for that, and we are very thankful for it. We do not have anyone to start the show off today with an ad read. So we're going to get right into the action. We're going to talk a little bit of football. I have some thoughts on just the season in general. I'm doing a whole series right now over at my other job, LouisianaSports.net, writing about the transfer portal grades and how you would grade each one. I haven't done South Carolina yet, but we're going to get a little sneak preview on that, as well as talking about the big news of the next iteration of NIL, which is actual contracts being actually enforced. So let's start there. Desmond Umeozulu, the former edge rusher who was at South Carolina for 3 years, I personally thought was going to be a big part of this year's team because you are looking for somebody to be on the other side of Dylan Stewart. Dylan Stewart obviously is the all-everything edge rusher that is a top 3 player overall in the top 100 rankings for players going into next season. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's show. There's a lot to like about him because the upside is there. Now, I will tell you this from people that I've talked to around the program that deal with him on a very consistent basis and know a lot more than me. This was not one that was like a huge loss, that it did not feel like a massive loss around I guess the program as a whole, not because they don't think he's a tremendous talent and could be great and reach his potential and all that kind of stuff, but more so because this became a pretty big hassle. And I think anytime you have a kid that signs a contract, we talked about this with Mike. How am I drawing a blank on this? We talked about this earlier with Michael Smith. Clearly I need some coffee, or we should have just done the show earlier, but here we are. But we talked about this earlier. Now they're the next iteration of this whole NIL era. And I don't know if this is as fascinating to you guys as it is for me, because I think it's just one of the things that's so new and exciting because there's so many that are happening with it. It's also very frustrating in a lot of ways. I think both of those things can be true at the same time. But Michael Smith's the guy that we talked about, tight end, that ended up signing with Syracuse. Then he wanted to come back to South Carolina, and then Syracuse was like, no, we're not letting him under contract. So then Ole Miss came in at the last minute and paid for him to be out of his contract. And so now what we found out basically in this cycle in the transfer portal is you get your contract, and there are no rules. But one of the rules, I guess, that is being enforced now is even if you sign a contract, as long as someone pays it and there's a buyout involved, then you are allowed to leave, but that money will come back to the school. I don't know how much money this is bringing back to South Carolina. I will tell you this. I can tell you with firm 100% confidence from what I was told, this is the least expensive and the lowest paid player at that position going into next year. Maybe that's part of the reason why he wanted to leave. But again, there was a deal already in place for him. So that part, again, maybe it shouldn't be surprising because of what we just talked about with it being him being the lowest ranked or lowest paid player from there. I don't know how much more Bama is going to pay him. I do know they're desperate for players there at that position, especially because of all the people they lost from this past season. So maybe it ends up being a thing that's better for both sides. We'll see. But South Carolina did enforce their right to say, no, you're going to pay us. Like, you are going to pay us for this. And you're starting to see this in a lot of other places as well. Now, the other part of that too that's interesting is it doesn't really affect South Carolina in this scenario, but I wonder what it looks like if it happens to South Carolina moving forward. That doesn't seem like a thing that Beamer is super willing to do. And I will make this purely speculative and probably not very big J journalism of me, which shouldn't shock anybody. But I don't know if Beamer is the type of coach that is going to say, okay, you sign somewhere else. We don't care. We'll take you either way. And you kind of saw that with Michael Smith. It felt like that was the roadblock. And maybe it was money that they were like, no, we're not going to pay the buyout and pay you to be here after what you've done. Like, maybe that's a much different example, but it probably is to an extent because he was the first player to basically quit on the team and then wanted to come back. But I do think it's interesting because the percentage of the payout that you're having, there are some schools, LSU is one of them, with certain players where they are having to pay these buyouts because they've already signed with someone else, where that's coming out of their NIL check that they're being promised by the new school. Whole crazy chaotic whole situation. I think I really hope this is not something we see more of. Like, I want to see us be able to take the next step in terms of like having more guardrails, having more parameters with the portal. What I really don't want to see next is let me clarify that by saying part of that would probably be, all right, well, if you sign your name, there are consequences like we already talked about. And one of the consequences is the other team's going to have to pay the buyout if we contractually included that you signed your name to, and or like, you're going to have to be on the hook for that, and we're going to recoup some of that money. Keep in mind, it also means that none of the money would have been paid to that player because they would be getting just the buyout. So you are essentially making money off of losing the player, which in that situation, I guess it's not ideal, but it's the best case scenario. But I really hope this is not the next iteration of this where we see, okay, well, so-and-so signed a contract and they can still get out of it. We just have to pay more, because then all you're doing is just creating even more money in a system that is now currently built off of greed with zero guardrails at all. And I think if you do that, that's when you're going to start seeing either you have to write the contracts better, or you're going to start seeing other schools that have unlimited funds like Miami, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ohio State, LSU this year. Like, you are not going to see them balk or flinch at being able to pay the buyout, which puts other schools at a really, really big risk. Because if you think about it like this way too, guys, all the work that goes in the retainment and the retention of these players and then or signing them out of the portal, all the work that goes into that, all the money that you have to set aside, because this is not just we'll pay you this. Most schools, I'm not including any of the 4 or 5 I just listed, LSU does not count on this one. Most schools have a budget they have to stick by. It is not an endless supply of money that's just like, go outside. We got some buried out back. Dig it up, and we'll just give it to whoever. We're printing it. Like that's not happening. So if you are in agreement with this, that is a domino that falls in a budget, in a overall roster management scenario. We're saying, okay, it's great that I now have more money that I can allocate somewhere else, but at the same time, like, we didn't pay this person because we were set to pay you X amount. I really hope that this is not a newest wave of what's the best way to put it? Tradition's not at all. But consistent behavior out of the portal. I really hope more than anything, this is we have to just be better about writing the contracts. This can't keep happening because it sucks. It just sucks. Recruiting is hard enough to follow when you have all these kids that are committing and then decommitting and committing somewhere else. You saw it last year with the running back Amari Thomas that went from Florida State to South Carolina back to Florida State. Like, that's annoying enough. And he's just one example. I cannot fathom the disinterest that will follow from college sports that is already starting to seep in if you're starting to see now hat changes and I'm talking about from like the recruiting ceremony stuff and last minute flips and changing their mind in the portal, because that sucks. So that is my thought on that. I'm glad South Carolina is able to recoup that money. We'll see where it goes from there. When we come back, we're going to talk about the basketball game And then dig a little bit into a thought I had earlier about why I think this year, I'm not ready to say it's 2011, 2012, 2013. I am ready to say, as of right now, it kind of feels like 2026 could be a much better 2024. We'll talk about that when we come back. All right, before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at TurboTax. Listen, tax season, guys, it sucks for one, but it does not have to take over your life. I will tell you this flat out. I hate paying taxes. I think it's so ridiculous that every year we get all this money taken out of our weekly paychecks and have to give all this money back to the government. We don't know where it's going. It's also crazy to me that after doing that for a full year, at the end of the year, we just, oh, by the way, you have a math project you have to do, and if you're wrong, you go to jail. Guys, don't stress out like me. Don't be irrational like me. Go find our friends at TurboTax and their full service. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress of any guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with local and TurboTax experts in person or connect online. They give you either option. They handle everything from W-2s, self-employed forms, and work to get you every single deduction. It is a huge time saver, gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take the taxes off your plates and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Guys, cannot recommend them enough. I used them last year. It was fantastic. Got a huge refund. Very, very excited about them. Looking forward to using them again this year. Now, let's get into, before we talk about the basketball loss, I thought about this today. I know it's way too early. You're starting to see all the way too early rankings come out. CBS came out with theirs the other day. South Carolina was 25th. I personally think, I hope they are 20 to 25, no higher, and go into the season as far under the radar as possible. It is going to be a very difficult year with a 9-game conference schedule. I have some thoughts about that as well. There's a push by some. I've said this before in the past. There's a push by some where if you are trying to have some sort of regulation with the scheduling, last year, even with the SEC playing 8 games in conference play, you had some teams that were playing 11 Power 4 opponents. You had several that were playing 10, and you had others playing 9. Same can be said in other conferences in the Big 10 as well. I think there's a couple from the Big 12 that had 11 games against Power 4 opponents. I look at that, and I think it's stupid. I've never thought the SEC should go to 9 games. I also think that if they are going to do it, what I heard this today from LSU's AD, Virgil Osbury, and he brought up the fact that the last 3 national championships champions have come from the Big Ten for sure. They also have something else in common. They have also played only 9 Power 4 opponents each. Indiana didn't play a Power 4 opponent in the non-con. Ohio State, well, that could be right because Ohio State did. They played Texas. So maybe this is last year though. So they didn't do it last year. And then Michigan the year before, Michigan played one of the worst out of conference schedules the year before that. This entire idea that you need to start stacking these schedules, and South Carolina, remember, was one of 4 teams in the SEC that before they moved to a 9-game conference schedule had already set out in the next single year. There was only 4 teams in the SEC doing that. Carolina was one of them. Reason to create things that are even harder for yourself. I also think that you're going to have to figure out a way to get everyone on the same page because right now, South Carolina, if they're playing 9 conference games, then has a automatic 10th Power 4 opponent every year at the end of the season with Clemson. That being out of the way, I have this feeling about this team for several for several reasons. It just kind of feels like, I know we're far apart, and I promise you, I'm not trying to do this all over again and like build us up like last year. I'm not. But it does feel like the way this team is being built, it feels way more similar to 2024 and like a better version than than I wish it would, to be honest. Like I had someone ask me the other day, it's like, well, I mean, like what do you think? Is it going to be just like 2025? Or are we going to have like shades of 2013, 2011, those years? And I was like, I'm not ready to say that at all. I do think the way this team is built going into this season, it feels a lot like 2024 because you finally have some depth on the interior defensive line. You should have maybe Julian Walker, who could potentially end up being a 5-star in this class after his performance in the Navy All-American game. You would have a freshman 5-star at one end and then a elite pass rusher, Dylan Stewart, on the other end, just like you have with Kennard and Stewart. Then behind you, you have so much continuity in the back seven. You return roughly 5 or 6 guys from the back seven that are really good. One of the guys you lose, who might be a first-round pick, and Brandon Cisse is going to be replaced by someone that was ranked almost identical to him when he out of the portal, Quaysheed Scott from Kentucky, who's clearly familiar with the league, played really well this year. You don't have a lot of concerns on the back end. What that could then create, and this is where South Carolina operates a lot better out of. It's not, well, they have to have a great run game. They have to have a great offensive line. Yeah, that'd be great. It starts, for the most part, with, hey, can we have a defense on the field that allows 20 less points a game? Like, can we feel confident that if we score 21 every week, we are gonna at least have a chance to win that game every single time we take the field? Because that defense is going to be good enough and opportunistic enough to turn people over, get stops repeatedly, and keep people out of the end zone. That if we could just do our job on offense and not have a bunch of turnovers, not get sacked, and be behind the chains a bunch, which has plagued us and plagued South Carolina throughout the last several years. But if you could find a way to do that, then you're a really dangerous team. There are, you look at Iowa. Iowa has been the definition of consistent at 8-4, 9-3. It feels like every year, right? They do nothing flashy on offense. They were better this year, but for years and years and years, nothing flashy on offense. Stellar D, really good special teams. That's where South Carolina should live. Like, they should be really good defensively, and they've got added depth. There is not a what do you call it? A position unit on this team, and I am speaking, hyperbolically here, but I'll say it anyway because I'm excited. I could say right now there might not be a position unit in the entire conference I have less questions about than South Carolina's linebackers. I mean, everyone's coming back. They're all coming off of really good years. 2 of them were first-year starters. And they're all going to be in their at least their third year of college, so that they're older, they're veterans. There's no concerns there. I don't feel a lot of concerns with Torian Gray's secondary because of how great they are. And you got a lot of new faces from a year ago that are all now, baptism by fire, all that kind of stuff. And then the defensive line, I think, can be much improved. If you start with that, and then you tell me about the other side of the team, where I don't think, like 2024, I don't think there's a Rocket Sanders on this in that running back room. I don't. I think Matthew Fuller could be really good. I think they got a couple guys out of the portal that could be really good, but I don't think there's a Rocket Sanders there. I do think Sellers will be better than he was last year, and closer to that what he was in his first year, and hopefully probably a much closer to how he was in the final 6 games in the first 6, because he's now had 2 years of starting experience under his belt. I think Nick Harbor going into year 4 is going to be the best version of himself, and he's got a load of talent at the receiver position now. I mean, tight end, not super concerned about it. I don't know if you have a guy that's going to be electric for you and put up crazy numbers, but I do think you got enough solid guys that can take the share of the load. And then, oh, by the way, you got a new offensive coordinator that is designed to figure out ways to get you in the end zone, has been one of the best to do it, and one of the most sought after names for years and years now. And I just think if you could figure out how you're going to go into getting that playbook implemented, the install for that, understanding of all that, that's going to take a lot of work, because it's now the 3rd different offensive coordinator Sellers had in his 3 years as a starter. But there's so much talent. I think I saw this the other day on Twitter, and I forgot the guy's name. He does a great job. And I wish I could give him his credit here. I'll try to find it and do it tomorrow. But we talk about the blue chip ratio, which is always so important for teams that are competing for a title, and they're still not at they're just under 50% for the first time. If you take the percentage of 4 and 5 star players at a high school rankings and versus the 85 total on the roster, you're talking about you have 39 last year. The year before that, you had 30. You have 42 this year. And so now it's once again your highest that you've had as a program. I love all that. It just feels like we're going into a year that could very much be like 2024, and the schedule is going to be tough. I mean, but here's the thing. We don't know what Bama's going to be yet. I feel confident you're going to beat Kent State. I know you're going to beat Towson. I feel confident you're going to beat Mississippi State. Kamario Taylor's going to be good. Feel confident you're going to be able to beat Kentucky. And also, you get both those games at home, by the way. Bama's a toss-up because it's on the road. But we have no idea what they're going to be. They have 7 seniors on that team. They're going to be extremely young. Then you have Florida on the road. I don't think they're going to be great. Tennessee at home. At Oklahoma feels like probably a loss. A&M probably feels like a loss. At Arkansas is a win. Georgia at home is concerning. And Clemson on the road, I feel like it's a win. I don't think Clemson's going to be very good next year. So, I see 8-4 easy, but we saw that a couple years ago, and they were able to outdo that. And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to get ahead of myself. But if you could play defense in that way and be stingy and turn people over, like literally what the calling card has been for years, I don't think you're going to have an offense that can't put up 20 points a game this year. I just don't. Like Mike Shula was a plague. I don't think you're going to have that issue this year. So, I mean, if you ask me, what does it feel like going into the season? It feels a lot like you have 2024, but a better version of that roster and of the team. It's and not just because the talent or any of that kind of stuff or trying to buy in the hype, but specifically because of the way the team and roster is built. That's why. We'll be right back and close out today's show because, of course, we have gone over my time that I thought we'd have. We come back, we will talk a little bit about the women's basketball game and save some stuff for tomorrow as well. Yo, guys, the Everydayer Club. You've heard me talking about it. I'm very excited about it. Okay, Allie is sending me Instagram reels in the middle of this. It's not helping. Not helping. You know what is helping? The Everydayer Club. Listen, I appreciate you guys so much for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast and network in the country. If you have not already, you need to go check out the Everydayer Club, okay? It gives access to an ad-free audio feed, whether you get the shows on Apple or Spotify or any other major podcast app platform. It also gives you an invite to a members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server where you can hang out with me, you can hang out with other listeners, or just Gamecock fans in general. So what do you get? It's $5 a month. You get no ads that you have to listen to, and it skips them right away. And you get a little bit of a community on the Discord server, talking with other Gamecock fans and listeners of the show. Maybe you guys can make fun of the way I'm pronouncing names. We could talk about sports. We could talk about whatever, primarily sports. I think that you'll probably have some fun in that server with me trying to pronounce names at some point. But it's all there for you, and it should be a lot of fun. I'm very excited to start interacting and getting that thing grown before we get into the football season as well. But we've got still basketball season. South Carolina's coming off a win. Women's basketball, I still think they're going to potentially be a Final Four team. And Paul Maneri is in year 2 of the baseball program, and I think they should be a lot better as well. So make sure you go sign up for it. I'll put the link in the show notes. Go do it today. Now, all right, let's close out the show with some sad news. South Carolina goes on the road as a 11.5-point favorite against Oklahoma and gets beat. If you watch the game, it was very obvious to see why they got beat. If you look at the box score, it might be very confusing to you. But if you watch the game, it wasn't. You got out-rebounded a ton. You got out-rebounded by 15. They had 54 rebounds. The game did go to overtime, but they lost by 12 in overtime, which is very tough to do. They had a 6-point lead in the second quarter, and that kind of just dissipated going into the third quarter, late in the third quarter. And then by the fourth quarter, you found yourself down between 6 points, it felt like, for most of that entire final 10 minutes. And then they were still able to force some steals. They were able to get some late buckets, and they were able to tie it up. They had a 2-point lead. They had a 2-point lead with less than, I think, 30 seconds left. Gave up a bucket to tie it up. Had the ball with 18 seconds left. Got it stripped. Couldn't get the Allie says hi. Couldn't get the ball in the hands of a shooter. It was really frustrating because it was very uncharacteristic of South Carolina women's basketball. And what I mean by that is you're going to have cold night shooting. Like they were 5 of 21 from 3 tonight. That's 24%. Obviously, that's not good. But everywhere else, they had 13 steals, right? They had, let me see here. Their largest lead was 8. At one point, they trailed by 14 in overtime. They led for 42% of the game, but they had 13 steals. They had 28 points off of turnovers. They didn't have. I'm sorry. They had 13 steals and 13 turnovers. Oklahoma had 21. But at one point in the fourth quarter, they missed 10 straight shots, and I cannot tell you how many of them were from point blank range. It was like there was a lid on the bucket, and it was terrible. It was just really bad. Tessa Johnson is not going to be, lights out from 3 every single game. That was the case tonight, which, again, it's not her fault at all. She was 3 of 8. That's still 38%, which is really, really good. But as a whole, like I said, it was 5 of 21. She was the only starter that was able to hit a 3. Raven Johnson was also really, really good, especially in the fourth quarter. She was brilliant and had several key buckets trying to cut into that lead when they were down 6 with like a minute and a half to go. Joyce Edwards missed a lot still played 40 minutes, which is insane. But you just had Medina Okot was pretty bad from point blank range. You did get to see the freshman phenom from France. She had 9 points. She was great. Only played 14 minutes, but it was bad down low, and it was bad, like really bad. On the other side, Oklahoma, you look at their numbers, and they did exactly what you see South Carolina do all the time. All 5 starters were in double digits. The freshman phenom, Aaliyah Chavez, who was, I think, between Oklahoma, Texas, South Carolina, and LSU. Last year, number 1 player in the country. I think she was number 1 overall. She was awesome. She was terrible in the first half. She had like 3 points, and she ended up with 26. And I think she ended up with like 11 or 14 in overtime alone. It was 5 of 10 from deep. She was really good. So you got beat. You got to pick yourself back up. It was a tough stretch from games against ranked opponents that we had talked about. It was on the road, but a pretty brutal loss to lose by 12, especially in a game that you forced overtime and battled back in and had the ball with the last shot. So that part sucked. But it's still not like Oklahoma sucks. They're a top 20 team. They're ranked 16th. You're on the road. That place was loud and it was tough. And you just had an off night. You had an off night. So that's what happens if I told you that you were down 6 going into the fourth quarter, and you went, and you went, what do you call it? You ended up going 0 of 10 in like a 4 or 5 minute stretch. You would probably assume you lost that game, and they did. So there's that. That is all for today's episode. We'll be back tomorrow. We got a lot to talk about too. Want to talk about the On3 way too early rankings, the way too early top 100 players. There's 3 South Carolina players in the top 22 overall, and baseball will be having their second scrimmage. Wild preseason schedule that Paul Maneri released the other day. Nothing like what we did when I played, and hopefully it works. So we'll talk about that tomorrow as well. Until next time, go Cox, guys.